that view. You can almost see the cells from here.
It's incredible how close it is to the city.
The morning in San Francisco began with a deceptive sense of permanence. The autumn sun, still low on the horizon, painted the Golden Gate Bridge in a searing incandescent orange, while the city's famous bay fog slowly dissolved into the ether. At Crissy Field, cyclists and runners inhaled the crisp, salty breeze, and at the Embarcadero, the aroma of roasted coffee and artisanal sourdough filled the air near the ferry building. It was a scene of absolute peace, the very definition of an urban routine in a metropolis that trusted in its own architectural solidity. Cable cars clattered up the steep inclines of Powell Street, carrying distracted tourists who gazed out toward Alcatraz Island. No one could have imagined that miles away, beneath the dark, freezing waters of the Pacific Plate was about to betray the North American Plate. For decades, tension had accumulated in total silence. There was no explosion, only a massive, deep-seated rupture. By 10:42 a.m., the first sign did not come from the sky, but from the abyss. The San Andreas Fault suffered a catastrophic vertical displacement. This sudden shift of trillions of tons of water created an invisible wave of energy on the surface. Silent at first, but lethal in its essence. The animals were the first to understand. At Pier 39, the sea lions, usually lazy and sun-drenched, began to bark in a frantic, guttural desperation, launching themselves into the water and swimming away from the coast with singular purpose. Fishermen on trawlers noticed their radars glitching wildly. Massive schools of deep-sea fish emerged, leaping in agony, fleeing a pressure change that their instincts had already decoded as a death sentence. Then, the most terrifying phenomenon occurred. The sea began to retreat. At Ocean Beach, the water receded hundreds of yards in a matter of minutes, revealing a seabed that human eyes were never meant to see. Ships wrecked for centuries, slime-covered rocks, and gasping quays were suddenly exposed to the open air. Curious onlookers walked out onto the wet sand, oblivious to the fact that they were standing in the cradle of their own destruction. Suddenly, the city's emergency alert system shattered the silence. Electronic sirens wailed in a mournful, rhythmic tone. On radio and television monitors across the city, the banner was stark and undeniable. Tsunami warning. This is not a drill. Evacuate to high ground immediately. The sky darkened with impossible speed. Storm clouds, driven by a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure, brought flashes of lightning that sliced through the horizon. And then it appeared. On the horizon, a thick white line transformed into a 150-foot high wall of dark, churning water. The sound was like 1,000 jet engines taking off at once. When the wave hit the Golden Gate, the iconic structure groaned and shuddered. The sea did not merely pass under the bridge, it struck it with the force of a mountain. Cars were swept away like grains of dust. The water surged into the bay with a hydrodynamic fury that defied description. In Market Street, panic took hold. The screams of the crowd were drowned out by the constant, low-frequency thunder of the approaching water. Run! Don't look back! Get to the hills! Police officers shouted through bullhorns, desperately trying to coordinate traffic that was already paralyzed by fear. The initial impact at the Embarcadero was devastating. The wave did not just flood the area, it pulverized it. The ferry building was pierced by the mass of water, which carried with it yachts, steel shipping containers from the port, and a lethal slurry of urban debris. The glass facades of skyscrapers shattered under the sheer air pressure pushed ahead of the wave. Water invaded the marble lobbies of the financial district, racing up stairwells and elevator shafts in seconds. From above, in news helicopters, the view was apocalyptic. San Francisco, the city of hills, was being shredded. The low-lying districts disappeared under a brown, violent whirlpool. Where streets and parks once stood, there was now a river of destruction dragging colorful containers like toy blocks, crushing everything in its path. Lightning illuminated the crest of the wave as it swallowed the Transamerica Pyramid's base. The roar was eternal, a physical weight that pressed down on the lungs of those trying to escape. Hours later, the water finally began to recede, but what it left behind was no longer the same city. Where the glitter of a modern metropolis once shone, there was now only mud and a sepulchral silence. The scene was desolate beyond measure. Entire streets were buried under a thick layer of gray slime and metallic wreckage. Luxury cruise ships and massive freighters now rested on their sides in the middle of main avenues, standing as rusted monuments to the ocean's power. Modern cars were stacked 10 high against the facades of historic buildings, some dangling precariously from second-story windows. Rescue teams, firefighters, and ambulances began to move slowly through the unstable terrain. There were no shouts now, only the distant, lonely wail of sirens and the rhythmic dripping of water falling from the skeletal remains of buildings. The Golden Gate Bridge, though partially standing, bore terrible scars, its snapped cables whipping in the wind like metallic lashes. On the high ground of Twin Peaks and the Coit Tower, survivors looked down in a state of catatonic shock. They saw a transformed landscape. Deep-sea fish lay scattered among the ruins of high-end boutiques. The power was out, and only the flickering orange light of isolated gas fires illuminated the descending dusk. San Francisco had faced the unthinkable. The silent catastrophe, which began as a simple tension in the depths, ended with the total reconfiguration of the urban geography. The city remained, but its soul was forever marked by the morning the sea decided to enter without knocking. Nature had demonstrated that no matter how high we build our towers of glass and steel, we are merely guests on a planet that breathes, moves, and occasionally reclaims what is hers. The sun set over a wounded San Francisco, covered in mud and salt, submerged in a silence that weighed more than any explosion.
Corriente de agua extremadamente rápida arrastrando árboles, señales de tráfico y escombros metálicos.
Hold on! We're losing traction on the left side! Command! We are being swept downstream. Request immediate assistance.
We need to move fast. The wind is picking up. Are the vitals stabilized?
As much as they can be out here. Let's go.
Control 応答せよね。お願い応答してね。私たちは助けが必要なのだ。
Todo va a estar bien, María. Estamos juntos.
Sí, saldremos de esto.
Bomberos y equipos de emergencia caminando sobre los escombros, linternas en mano, buscando sobrevivientes entre las ruinas. Un rayo de sol atravesando las nubes oscuras, iluminando la ciudad en ruinas. Crestas de ballenas y restos de vida marina atrapados entre las estructuras de los edificios. Escena impactante.
Distant shot from the sea, showing San Francisco wounded, the water now calm, but the city changed forever.